part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
What's up, everybody? Chase Smith here from the Chase Smith Podcast and Cavs on the Break NBA podcast.
And I'm JD, host of the Hyman Podcast, part of the Press Play Podcast Network, and we are super excited to bring you a brand new show starting next Tuesday, the Fanfare Podcast.
The Fanfare Podcast is all about your favorite movies and our favorite movies and the best moments in cinema. To help guide our discussion, each episode will feature one classic, and we will grade this movie using a report card-like scale A through F. We're going to be grading categories like acting, directing, cinematography, the score, and even the movie poster itself.
And when we're not featuring a movie report card, we'll be sharing our movie rankings, franchise deep dives, actor and director interviews, and everything in between. Movies have been a major part of our lives, and we cannot wait to share our thoughts with you.
Our premiere episode will drop Tuesday, June 27th, and JD and I will be reviewing Raiders of the Lost Ark in preparation of the release of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny on June 30th, the fifth installment of the franchise.
Join us on the Fanfare Podcast, available on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Welcome to the Chase Smith Podcast, a conversation on current events and culture. We are proudly part of the Press Play Podcast Network, empowering diverse voices to launch professional, engaging podcasts. With me today, an absolute legend who needs no introduction, but Charlie, I think we should give him one anyway. What do you say?
Whatevs, it's all good.
What, dude, that's just such like a typical hang loose surfer answer, man. I love it. Oh, here we go. For the past 35 years, this guest has led local churches in Virginia, Indiana, and California. He also has a podcast with his ministry mentor called Good Days with Eddie and Charlie. And you pastored a little band called Switchfoot, right? That's correct in California?
Yeah, I did not pastor them. We were friends and hung out and did a lot
even
of
better.
ministry. Yeah, but I was not their pastor.
Okay. Currently, he's the professor of youth ministry at Indiana Wesleyan University. He's the director of youth ministry events. Charlie Alcock, thank you for joining the Chase Smith Podcast, mate. Thank you. How you doing?
Doing good. Good days.
Good days. Look, I look for any excuse to talk with you, but now we can add author to that list. Charlie, you have a book coming out, or has it already been released? Tell us about this book.
It's just been released. It's called Full Circle. And so actually, years ago, I had a book called More Than a High.
Oh, okay.
That's been released in a second edition. But this was designed for students who just accepted, Jesus, or made a massive commitment, at a youth camp. So It's making spiritual high your spiritual norm. So it was designed specifically for students.
Okay.
And the sequel to this, called Beyond the Moment, actually comes out in December.
Okay.
So this is the second edition. The sequel comes out. Full Circle. This is for youth leaders. This is for volunteers. This is for students. So this is that are learning to do ministry, like they're studying for ministry. So this is for the adult volunteers, the adult leaders, the pastors, where those other two are for middle school and high school kids.
Or for students learning youth ministry in schools, right?
Yes.
I like this strategy. How long have you been teaching youth ministry? How many years?
20 years at IW.
20 years. And which is incredible, by the way. Incredible.
That's kind of
it does sound weird to say a little bit. It sounds weird to ask. Are you going to be using your own curriculum?
So this is mine. Yes.
Okay. Right. But the Full Circle, you're going to be like, hey, students, this is a required text, because we might be on edition 5 here in a couple semesters, man. Let's get some books. Let's get some units moved here.
Well, this is basically my ministry thesis, because it's how to think biblical, how to think tactical, how to think practical. Yeah. So instead of chapters, it's in sections. And the thing that has bothered me my whole life in ministry is that we're not unified. The body of Christ is one of the most divided organizations that exists on the planet Earth. I mean, I love college football. I mean, they have a system that people are unified under. The NFL, they have a system, sports, everybody, the banking system. The church is all over the map. But there is a guideline, and it's called the Bible, and And we have this biblical mandate. So we're unified biblically. Now, tactics, well, whatever. Tactics are preference. Yeah. So if we're unified in our biblical principles, that Jesus loves everybody, so we should love everybody. Jesus worshiped. By the way, Jesus didn't invent worship. He was a worshiper, so he modeled it. So we should model it. Jesus discipled people. Discipling is a process. It takes a long time. Jesus developed people in their gifts and talents, leadership. And all of that is making a disciple.
Yeah.
So what I found out over the years, bro, is like some people, where their gifts and talents are, the people who really love outreach and evangelism, they'll be like, that's what Jesus did. Jesus, went after lost sheep. That's what we should do. So our church is about disciple, is about evangelism. Well, there's another person that's like, no, Jesus discipled people. It's all about discipleship. We're going to die in the hill of discipleship because that's what Jesus did. And then the other church is like, Jesus, we need to come together and worship and proclaim his truth to the body of believers. And then there's another church that's like, man, it's about, developing leaders. We're a church that's about leadership. So the church that does discipleship really well looks at the church that does evangelism outreach and thinks, man, you guys are just about big numbers. It's just about getting a bunch of people in. You just do the big events. The church that's really good at evangelism and outreach looks at the discipleship church and is like, you guys are just a holy huddle. You're so you're so heavenly minded, earthly good. Both of them can't stand the worship church because it's about, they'll come up with
fog and the moving lights.
Yeah, it's skinny jeans. I've seen, professors and others talk about skinny jeans. It's like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
It's like, don't waste your time on stupid stuff like that. Nobody likes, the people who think they have the higher end. We're a church of leaders. No, the biblical model is that you reflect all of it. You don't pick and choose the part of Jesus that you want to represent. He went out and cared about everybody. We go out and care about everybody. He worshiped. We worship. He discipled people. We'll disciple people. He developed people in leadership. We'll develop people in leadership. And what he called them and sent them out as were disciples. So those are all things that we can be unified on. Now, tactics are just preference. So I really don't care what your tactic is for doing outreach and evangelism, or what your tactic is for worship, or what your tactic is for discipling people, or your tactic for leadership. That's based on context.
Yeah.
Like even in my ministries, bro, it's like, when I was in Indiana, our tactics during the fall season, we'd have this thing called the barn bash. And that was a tactic. It was a big outreach event and people loved it. And we had hay rides and all kinds of stuff. And it was cold out and it was band and cider and big, huge fire in the middle of the night. And it was like great days. But man, when I said we're going to have a barn bash out in San Diego, they looked at me like I had lost my mind. We didn't do barn bashes.
Yeah.
We did these things called beach blaze and these other things. And, we're out on, Fiesta Island with this massive fire, on the beach doing other stuff. That was just a tactic.
Yeah.
The biblical principle is exactly the same.
Yep.
And when I found out, bro, it's like people get all worked up over tactics. The way that people do, I don't know if that's the right way to do that. It's like, that's up to that each individual ministry context. Decide what's the way they lead worship. So I'm not going to get caught up on if it's an organ, a piano, guitar.
Yeah.
What as long as it's in spirit and truth, who cares?
Well, specifically in youth ministry, I think like this copycat syndrome is really bad. They see someone do an escape room and they're like, oh, we got to do it. And they just throw it in their calendar and they're just like, wait, what? They take no, you're showing me a book. The copycat, there it is. I don't have a copy of it yet, Charlie. I don't have a copy of it. But it's all the time. And student pastors, my experience, they don't take time to study their context. When they're applying for a church, they don't take time to look at their context, which is so important. And so this is, that's so funny. You showed me that. There it is.
I mean, that's what it's about. Yeah. And so this
it's
book,
almost like I've had your classes before. I don't know.
That's right. This book, so it's think biblical, think tactical, and then think practical. And then I went and talked to a bunch of friends who've been in ministry, and
I won't take that personal. It's okay. What chapter am I on? Or I'll send you my address for the royalty checks. It's okay.
Yeah. But it's like one of them is Think Context by Stacey Shaw. Mm-hmm. So like if you open up in the middle there, it's like you have all these like different ones.
Oh,
like,
so cool. Yeah.
Think about culture, think prayer, think social media, think calendar, think families, think communication, protocols, room design, think volunteers, think about schools, think context.
All of that. Yep.
Think teaching and preaching. Think about, and the last one is a story I'll tell you really quick. It's called Think a Lifetime. But it was written by a friend of mine named Andrew Morrell, who's a pastor in Marion. And Andrew was in my youth group a long time ago before I went to San Diego. And he was the guy that came with this friend named Zach Randolph, who's a basketball player, ended up going to Michigan State. I think might be the NBA sixth man, Hall of Fame guy.
The Zach Randolph who played for the Memphis Grizzlies?
Yeah.
Okay, so I was like, wait a second. Okay,
that came to the youth group. I mean, the whole 9 yards. But his best friend, Andrew, gave me fits. And but the thing about that was over years and years and years, we split up because I moved to California and he went to college. And it was years later that we reconnected. And now, God's word doesn't return void. And now he's a pastor.
Yeah, and it's incredible.
And the whole his little snippet, his little pieces. Think about a lifetime that the people that you're influencing with now, you might not ever get to see that tree grow, but we're responsible for planting seeds.
That is such an important message, man. I'm still in full-time ministry, 14 years, which it sounds crazy to say out loud. But it's hard to think because sometimes ministry can be really discouraging. It's hard to think that this is a marathon. It's hard to think long-term impact that maybe a fall retreat might have, that you have no clue. You just know, oh man, pizza didn't show up and this game flopped and then the speaker ended 25 minutes early. Like that's all maybe pastors or leaders are thinking, but it's just so easy, Charlie, to forget the think long-term, think lifelong impact. It's so easy to forget that. And that is such a good word, man. That is such a good word.
Bro, I'm entering year 35.
Legend.
So it's just one of those things where you just keep on rolling and you stay with the students and they help you, choose the right hat.
Yeah, man.
And
I can't wait to check this out. I'm going to include the Amazon link. Is that okay in the show notes so people can go check it out?
Cool, yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Awesome. Well, congratulations on the book, Charlie. I want to talk about how we first met because it's a pretty I don't know. I didn't go to Indiana Wesleyan University for my undergrad. But when I was hired at a Wesleyan church out of college, I started grad school at Wesley Seminary, and then got plugged in with some denominational stuff. I don't remember what my first Charlie Alcock experience was. It might have been this youth ministry cohort at 12 Stone with you, Jeff Eckert and Derek Idle. It was either that or we were on this like Fuel Youth Ministry YouTube TV show before there was YouTube TV shows with Jamie Chambers, who's a friend in Canada, and Scott Simmons. I don't know if that was my first exposure to you. But then I had you in class in grad school and we did some residency stuff together, which was a lot of fun. And Charlie, here's what I have learned about you, man. You have a gift that whenever you talk with someone, they feel like the most important people in the room. And you're just an incredible public speaker and you're able to move a crowd to have an authentic encounter with a living God. And I can't wait to see how those gifts that God has given you on top of a lot of other anointings you have, how you put this into a book form and you're able to make the reader feel like you're having a personal conversation with them. And then you're able to, through all of the, tactics and the practicality, and are able to, move them to a biblical, like, kind of paradigm in student ministry. And so have people been like, what took you so long to write a book like this? Like, what has been like some responses to this book? Because to me, I was like, man, how have you not had a book like this yet?
Yeah, it's just, I don't know how to answer that, except for I just never saw myself in that light, and it's about every day and win every day.
Yeah.
And it's just, I think stuff like this is a byproduct of ministry. I've always respected people that did it and didn't write about it. Like I would get frustrated with people that might write a book who've never actually lived it.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's what's in this book is a lot of pain and suffering. And I even share some of that. One person said, I think you're being too vulnerable here, because I share stories of failure, where we're on this trip and we had a ton of kids, and everybody would say that's a massive success. I mean, I'm at a church where, we have 4 times as many kids now, students going on the trip than ever before. And the numbers are huge, and everybody thought it was a success, but it wasn't, because really, it was, we missed the mark. And I share some of that on deep down, that was a lesson for me to learn that we have to have a purpose and a plan for everything we do when we take tons of people out of town. I set students up for failure because we were on this big, massive ski trip. And there's a lot of students that couldn't handle being 6 hours, 7 hours from home.
Yeah.
And when people would, want to hang out with people of the opposite sex in their room, and we had to figure that out. It's like, no, you can't do that. And there's tension and all that stuff. The stuff that just that it's like, that's not what this is about.
Yeah.
And much more than that. That's just a simple little example. And I share that story in here because I learned that I need to be better as a leader. And nobody said I did anything wrong. Everybody thought it was great. And they blamed those kids, those students. Well, those students are just bad students. Well, there aren't bad students.
Amen, man.
Students who are struggling, who are in the midst of pain and crisis, and they're trying to figure out their identity, and they're trying to figure out if anybody loves them and cares about them. And it's just, but no, it was a lesson for me that I have to be a better leader to make sure that every student has a chance to succeed whatever we do. And our youth ministry doesn't have to be built about, 1 or 2 things. We can be good in outreach. We can be good in worship. We can be good in discipleship. We can be good in discipling people and giving them gifts and talents. And by the way, we can do outreach multiple ways. We can do things where people who are part of it, it's very manageable, and it's in a context, like a local context, where we can mitigate all kinds of problems or concerns. And then if we're going out of town, overseas, I understand what group can do that trip.
Yes.
And so now I understand how, like, when I'm taking people overseas, they have to have gone through our discipleship process and be, developing as leaders, or we're not going overseas with them. But it doesn't mean we're not leaving them behind, because we have other things for them. It's learning how to build something that meets the needs of students where they're at. Yeah. Not just, if you're not where we're at, then we're going to leave you behind.
Yeah. And I think if you as a leader in student ministry, if you think that you have no room to grow, or that you have it all figured out, you are probably not going to last long, because you're going to get frustrated with how student ministry evolves and changes and the culture shifts. But then no one's going to want to work with you and volunteer with you. And that is such a huge kind of like spirit to have there, just humility that, hey, like, I mess up, I have room to grow always. And what can I learn from this now?
I was the smartest in youth ministry my first year. And then since then, I've gotten progressively dumber.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now you know what you don't know.
Yep.
It's like, oh, I wish I could have done that differently.
Yeah.
So the older you get, the dumber you get.
Mm.
Because you just realize I don't know everything.
Yeah. What shifts have you noticed in youth ministry over the last 5 years? You have your hands both in the educational part of it and the developmental part, and then in the practicality part. What shifts have you noticed? Let's start with this, with just like students in general and student ministry. What shifts have you noticed here in the last 5 years? I know COVID's probably influenced that quite a bit, but
yeah, and I'm gonna walk this one gently, but I think that there's a lot of things that have not changed with the human. A human being still needs to know, that they matter. Who is your identity based in?
Yeah.
If Jesus Christ is at the epicenter of your life, now, you have something in which you can build a life on. If not, it can be anything.
Yeah.
So what I've seen through COVID is I saw a bunch of people who stayed at home and learned something. Maybe they YouTubed how to play guitar, or they dug deep in some part of their life that they never dug deep in. They've never dug that deep before. And so there's this radical shift during COVID of we came out of COVID and there's 16 times as many people who could play guitar and lead worship than before. Because they sat home and they figured it out. And that's a really beautiful thing. At the same time, this is classic. Everybody's talking about this, but the level of anxiety and fear is, exploded. And so a lot of people have lost this current generation seems to be very tender. And I've heard other people say it differently, like they're soft, and I think they're wrong for saying it that way.
Yeah,
I think they're tender. I think they've been burnt. They're scared. They see their heroes, people older than them, suffer. And so it's not like they don't want to fight for it, because at the same time, I've seen a passionate pursuit of Jesus Christ. This summer, I was at 5 full weeks of youth camps. And because of what I do, I was at other camps as well, helping them get going or sending students to. And there were some miraculous things happening where students want the truth. They want to know what is true. They're tired of all the dishonesty, and we live in such a divisive environment. Our culture is so divisive that they want to know what is actually believable. What do I believe in? What actually is true?
Yeah.
And so now that's why I say tender, because it's like they're kind of walking into it like, I don't know if I trust you or not, or whatever the stuff is.
Yeah. It's like,
it's a radical time.
Like post-modernity is like here. Like we read about it so long, like in the 2010s, and it's like, get ready, it comes. And it's just here. I can attest to that fire in students, Charlie. This past year in ministry has been like the most fruitful year of ministry I've seen in youth ministry. Maybe not like explosion of numbers wise, but just like authentic encounters with the living God. I had never seen a miracle until this year in ministry. I'd never seen a student pray for healing for their dad, and they got like, there's just things that I've like seen and experienced and seen students, whether it's words or like prophetic, like, and these students are hungry, and they've experienced this real moment they've come face to face with God, and it's changed their life. It's changed the way that I pray. It's changed the way that I lead worship. It's changed the way that I pastor students. And we're just chomping at the bit for the fall, man. And so I can attest to that hunger. I can attest to that search for truth and authenticity, and this like hunger for like something real. And it's there. It's there. It's there. What I'm gonna maybe not as deep as where we just were. It's hard to pivot from there. One of my favorite memories with you, Charlie. Where I was up in Marion for a class for a week, and we ended up going to a Miami Heat Indiana Pacers playoff basketball game. Do you remember this?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was great. LeBron's first year with the Heat, and going to school in Ohio and loving basketball and feeling at that moment betrayed by LeBron. I was hoarse after that game because I feel like I was screaming hate on behalf of all the state of Ohio for LeBron. But that was just an incredible moment. And that's another thing that God, Charlie, has, I think, really just blessed you with, is you just, whatever you do, you just know how to have a great time. And so I don't know if I ever thanked you for that, because we didn't have to pay for anything. It was just like, hey, we're all doing this. It was the best. It was the best. And so you remember much about that game?
Bro, that was good days right there.
That was good
I
days.
had some freedom to get that program going, and I told them what we were doing. It's like, all right.
It was awesome.
But just that's the thing. It's I tell the students all the time, it's like the road reveals. Like when you travel with me during the summer and all these youth camps, when you do Fusion and Never Too Young, on campus with our ministry events, like Fusion, this big high school conference, Never Too Young is a middle school conference. Students who are part of that outside of the classroom, you really get to know them. That's what that was about, was like, hey, let's get out of the classroom and eat some garlic fries and watch some basketball and just get to know people.
It was incredible. The Heat won that game. The Pacers were winning. Dwayne Wade took over in the fourth quarter. LeBron was a specimen on the court, bigger, faster, stronger than everybody, but Dwayne Wade closed that game out, and it was impressive. But it was they ended up, that was the year they lost to the Mavericks, which was great in the finals.
We were a little bit high.
We were just a little bit high. It's a little bit high, but still so much fun. Oh my goodness. Hey, there's a Wesleyan convention coming up here in December. Talk to me about Follow a little bit.
So Follow is it's been happening since 1970. They just called it something different. Actually, denominations would do these things even earlier than that, in the 50s, 60s. They'd get together. Well, it started in 1970 for the Wesleyan Church officially after they had merged, and they did things. And like I said, even going back, you could be at Wesleyan Church and go to one of these youth weekends that they called them. There's these big gatherings in 1958. So this rendition is a chance to get everybody together. Look at 6,000 students at the Duke Energy Center in Cincinnati, Ohio, because that's so centrally located. And it's about empowering the next generation. So that's the theme. And you try to have incredible speakers, which we have great speakers. Torrin Wells is coming in as a special guest as well. You have great worship, great breakout seminars. 3 days, 2 nights, actually 3 nights in Cincinnati. And it's just an incredible gathering. What I like about these conferences, especially Follow, is when a student goes to that, they realize they're not alone in this thing. When you get a chance to go to that large gathering, the first time I ever went to something like this, I didn't know there were that many other Christians. And it's like, whoa, I see the bigger context. So, you hear from incredibly gifted communicators. You're worshiping with 6,000 people. You have these breakout sessions and other things that you're learning, and you go home empowered.
The crowd is pretty breathtaking. And on the flip side of that, it's also inspiring because you get 6,000 voices worshiping God and really just pouring their heart out. It's incredible, man. I'm going to be taking a couple students for a day. I'm not going to be able to take our group for the whole weekend. I know other denominations are invited, but it is a Wesleyan convention, right?
And it is open to other denominations. I mean, we're trying to work with other denominations right now that are looking for something, and it makes sense. And we have friends who actually are churches in Cincinnati that are going to come to this. and they're not Wesleyan. So
there's a big Vineyard Church in Cincinnati.
Yes, 100%. And one of our IW students, Joel Firebaugh, is over all student ministries at Crossroads, which is like the 4th largest church in the country.
Oh, wow.
In Cincinnati.
Oh, sweet.
And Hannah Watkins, who just graduated from IW, is on his staff. And she just spoke at Fusion, actually. So there's a lot of ministries that are around the area, but it's open to anybody. Great pricing, because you are staying in nice hotels. You don't have to worry about your, finding your own space. So people say, well, how much is it? Well, at $250, that includes hotel. That's pretty cheap.
Really good deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. With 20 years have you ever calculated the number of students that are now in ministry from your time and undergrad or postgrad? Like what is the Charlie Alcock reach? What is that number?
I don't know. I mean,
over 500 pastors.
Yeah. I know back in the day at churches, I at one time at this church in Indiana before we moved to San Diego, because like in those days, like Maxwell, I mean, John Maxwell's like, hey, Skyline's a big deal.
Yeah.
This is and I didn't actually interview. They reached out to me, and he was moving. He was going to his national ministry, and so I was there during this massive transition. And I love the church I was at in Indiana, but we knew in that church of 800, we had about 300 students that came to youth ministry, and we knew 36 pastors out of that group.
It's incredible.
That includes Andrew, who's a pastor in Marion right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just out of that youth group. So I don't know. I never really thought about it.
Not for a pat on your back, not to do that, but just to be in awe of what God has done. My wife, Leslie, her mom was in childcare for like 30 years. And there was one weekend we all took and just like thought about how many kids she has helped parent just in this small Ohio community. It was over 100 families in this community who had someone that loved them, that was there for them, and that prayed over them. And that's just like 30 years. It's like 2 or 3 generations, some more, but just incredible the influence that she had in childcare. And man, I just think that number, man, would just be so God honoring, and just like, oh Lord, I never could have imagined, or I can't wait to see what the next 1,000, you know what I mean? Just like, I don't know. I just, I think it's cool to take stock sometime, man. Maybe your next book is called The Next 1,000. I don't know.
Yeah. I tell you, man, ministry has been better than I ever hoped and dreamed.
Yeah.
So I'm very, very grateful.
Well, I hope this podcast was better than you've ever hoped and dreamed, Charlie. I really do.
Clearly, your shirt is better than I hoped and dreamed.
Yo, I'm in my Tom Selleck phase. I got like this Magnum PI button up and a caterpillar on my face, a little mustache here. I'm just doing what I can. I don't know, man.
Keep on, man.
My son hates
my hat out because my hair's a mess, but I haven't lost any hair, so it's like that keeps me rolling too.
Hey, that's a win.
Yeah,
that's a win, man. That's a win. Thank you so much, Charlie, for coming on the show. I appreciate it. Always love talking with you. Where can we listen to your podcast, and tell us about your book one more time?
So it's wherever you get your podcasts. It's Good Days with Eddie and Charlie. And, it's part of our Called Collective, but it's all about youth ministry. And we interview a ton of people. And then Full Circle. Mm-hmm. This is for leaders, volunteers, people that are, studying for ministry. More Than High, this is for students, middle school, high school, people who just accepted Jesus, people who are, I wrote this because I needed discipleship for my fall series at Skyline. Mm-hmm. And then it got published later, so it was a discipleship series coming out of youth camp we had a ton of students make commitments. And this one kid named Chad said, hey, how do I make the spiritual high the spiritual norm? And I always heard people talk about the camp high, and I've heard people say, is this a book about smoking pot more than high? It's like, no, it's about the camp high.
Yeah.
And so they're both available on Amazon or Wesley Press, or whatever. So they're just resources. And I literally, bro, made them as cheap as possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
I cut them way down because I wanted the kid to read that actually. And then there's on More Than a High, there's follow-up questions. It's actually
cool.
Churches use it for their discipleship material.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hey, man, next time you're in Columbus at Cypress, hit me up. We'll go grab some wings or something.
November, back-to-back weeks. I'll hit you up.
That's a date.
All right.
All right, Charlie. Have a great week, man. Thanks.
Hey, see you, bro.
All right, peace.